Hello and welcome to Season 4, Episode 11 of the EUphoria podcast. We're going to be talking about Fnatic, G2, and Schalke versus Rogue. I'm joined by my babushka, Frostgren, and also the two premier coaches in the LAC. Youngbuck, you have a wonderful title. You're like the 6-star general. Grabs, your players are all trolls, so the only thing that I hear you referred to as Mr. Grabs or Mr. Krabs on occasion, like, is there a title that you want or aspire to?
I like the legendary draft destroyer.
Legendary
that appears on YouTube all the time.
Legendary draft destroyer. All right, yeah. All right, so the legendary draft destroyer, the 6-star general. Of course, we're available on Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, or YouTube. I have to say it at least once an episode, and I forgot, so I'm putting it there. So thank you both for joining. You guys obviously got time away in round 1 to prepare for your matchup versus each other. Have you guys been practicing this entire time? Have the teams stepped away, taken a bit of a break? How have you guys been using the time?
We've only taken a 2 days break and then started practicing immediately. I know for G2 it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, we took up the entire week until up to week 9 off. Players went home if they wanted to, and then we actually practiced last week. So a bit more try-hard feeling. All
right, I like that you guys are ramping up and it's getting pretty try-hard. Before we talk about your matchup, which I think is, you said it right before the show started, but the potential to be the greatest European best of 5 of all time. Not to overhype it or anything, Kings, Legacy, Dynasty. I want to talk a little bit about round 1. I had the absolute, I'll call it pleasure, but just overall I'd say weird experience of casting Rogue versus Splyce and witnessing, as far as I could say, all common knowledge die in front of my eyes. So just to put it bluntly, what the f*** happened to Splyce? Like, what from your perspective, assuming you guys are watching to figure out who's going and you guys both saw the series, like, what happened?
So I would say, first of all, Rogue played the basics and fundamentals pretty well overall. But it's also funny because I think Youngbuck and me spent time saying how Splyce doesn't make anything happen. So we saw them not make anything happen for 3 games in a row. Rogue got leads and played them out correctly, and then suddenly it's a 3-0. That being said, though, we were in the same position last year, where we seemed really lost going into quarterfinals against Misfits. Then we took time off, and then suddenly we were the old G2 again in Gauntlet. So I still think Splyce, if they actually take a break and then talk about how they want to play the game out again, will be good for Gauntlet for sure.
Were you surprised? I mean, you guys obviously had that shared philosophy of Splyce being a team that doesn't do anything, which definitely rang true. But was it surprising to the magnitude of which this collapse happened, Youngbuck?
Yeah, no, it definitely was. Like, we were a little bit surprised they picked Rogue, but even then they should have pretty easily won based on them just having better individual players and just having better fundamentals, like Grab said. I just don't really know what happened. I think one of the things that has hurt Splyce is that there hasn't been much improvement over the split. I think they've been doing the same thing over and over. And yeah, if they don't make things happen and you lose an early game in this kind of meta, it gets really rough. And Rogue somehow won all 3 early games.
Turning to the other side, do you guys deal with Rogue a lot behind scrims, like off stage?
We actually don't scrim Rogue that much. They've not been like a high priority scrim partner, to be fair.
Where is their power coming from?
Yeah, like where? How did this happen? Where did this? Because I think people, there's been a lot of speculation as to like how good Rogue is, and people have obviously had a lot of good things to say about like a player like Larson, a player like Inspired. But to me, coming into this cast, I remember doing draft prep with Ender. And he's like, they literally never draft the same thing. I have no idea what they're going to do. It's all mediocre. I'm not impressed. And I was like, oh, okay. And then we come in, and yeah, they draft 3 different things over 3 different games, but they totally smash every single time. Like, where the hell did this come from, too?
I will say that we did nail Splyce's draft every single time because they draft the same thing every single time. I don't know. Like, Rogue, I thought, coming out of it, I thought that there was mental boon from Splyce. And I thought that Rogue obviously made, like, big improvements and played really strong fundamental League of Legends, but for some reason I was like, I bet something's happening in scrims where maybe Rogue are getting like really good scrim partners because a lot of the teams leave. You can only really scrim the teams around you that have stayed, so you're either scrimming like top end teams in the ERLs or you're scrimming, I assumed Fnatic and G2, but apparently not. And I was like, that's probably what happened. They probably got great scrims and just like leapfrogged over.
I mean, how much of the like, so right now after that series, people are obviously very high on Rogue. They're like, Larson is a monster. Inspired is a pathing genius. He's the new pathing Nirvana, right? Like, how should I, as like a European fan, be on the Rogue hype train? That would be my question for both of you. Like, should I be like, Rogue are insane now? Every single week they triple in skill. They're like the Super Saiyans of League of Legends. Like, is this now that Rogue are going to be continuing to contest the top, or do you feel like this was like a one-off series where Rogue played their best, Splyce probably played pretty close to their worst, and that's like the only time this is going to happen? Or should we expect Rogue to actually like contest Schalke in the coming series?
Yeah, I think you can actually watch them contest Schalke. Schalke didn't have that great of a series against Vitality. It didn't look very, how do you say it, solid. And Rogue was actually just really solid all around. So why would they not be able to beat Schalke?
No, I do agree, and I think again, Splyce didn't do much in the early game, so maybe Schalke is a bit more aggressive than if Rogue doesn't find themselves in these spots they can practice for and they know they can play out, it will be harder. So I think overall, if you like think for like against us, for example, I think the split is a bit too early for Rogue, but I think for sure if they stay together for next year at least, they will be really good because again, they're all rookies. Players like Finn are really good. I think Vanda quietly is having one of the best splits as a support for a long time, and I think a lot like revolves around him. Like also covering for Woolworth a bit because I mean compared to like top ADCs, he's not quite there. So I think for sure they have the basis to be a really strong team. As Jambak said, Schalke was not the best against Vitality, so it could be a close series for sure.
Yeah, the Schalke Vitality series was. You had a lot of strong words for it when you were casting it. Like, was that the most disappointing?
So, no, it was supposed to be a tri-cast, and Vedius got sick on the day, and so it turned into a duo cast. And Medic and I haven't duo cast at all the entire split. I think we did it once because Vedius was also sick that day. I remember like sitting down and turning to Medic. I was like, what the f- are we supposed to talk about here? Like, we prepped all of these points for like Vedius and I to like bounce back and forth on each other. And when we got into the game, and it started out really bad to start with. Like, Upset gets a triple kill like in the first 2 minutes, and that just sets the tone of a cast where we just went off the rails really fast. And then we come into like game 2, we're like, okay, hard reset, very serious, playoffs, let's gear in. And the teams just kept A-ramming, just kept running each other down. I was talking to Vedius in between the games. I was like, Vedi, do I go hard or do I like back off? Because normally I don't like to flame European teams. Fan bases, very vocal here. People don't like it, so I usually just stay really positive. Vedius was like, if you don't go in, you're a disappointment to your family. And then there's that line where Vitality set up to get the mid lane tower, and I'm just like, this is what is wrong with Vitality right now. And then they just like feed into Akali, and that's what happened that game. I just got progressively more tilted.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like I learned anything about either team from. Well, Vitality played. I'm gonna say results as expected, but Schalke did not feel quite as like clearly better than Vitality as I was hoping for. I guess looking at them, like when Splyce collapsed, I was like, okay, guys, like looking at European Worlds teams, like Schalke are still fine. Everything's gonna be fine. Origin are in the gauntlet. Everything's okay. And then I watched that series and I'm like, so can we like just send 2 teams to Worlds this year? Like, is that maybe Rogue can be the third one just for like the memes? But I don't know. Is this indicative, do you think, of Schalke's like overall performance of what we should expect for them versus Rogue? Is this kind of like this sloppy, very messy, or do you think that in the same vein that like Splyce had a difficult series, it's just Schalke kind of, I don't know, trolling around a little bit?
I think it's like for some reason Vitality still has this aura for teams that they can pull off a cheese or something, and people respect them more than they should. So maybe Schalke went into the series not saying, okay, they're gonna end here, but be a bit more defensive and respect them a bit more, and therefore they didn't take the chances they could have taken. So I give them the benefit of the doubt, especially because they looked like a strong team going into playoffs.
Yeah, I think we can expect more from Schalke. I didn't think they have a really good series. In practice, they've been a lot better. Having said that, Vitality should have won that series. They had game 2, 3, and 4 in the back, but I felt like some players just wanted to go home early. It was that bad.
Yeah. I do agree.
God damn, there we go. I mean, that's brutal, and that makes me so sad for those guys because obviously, like, very tough. And
Nothing I said was as mean as that. That was mean.
Yeah, it was mean. It was mean.
At least there was no specific names there.
Yeah.
You were definitely calling out people by name on cast.
I was just very specific about who wanted to go home early.
I'll just say people have a lot closer personal relationships with towers than I expected from any other series. That's pretty much it. Who do you expect to be joining both of you in Athens? Is it going to be Rogue or Schalke? Some soft predictions heading into the week.
I'm going to predict a 3-2 for Rogue. For Rogue. Yeah.
For Rogue? Yeah. Hell yeah, all right.
Okay. I mean, you're probably the one who has to face them, so you can choose. I don't really mind who's going to be. I think both have a shot to go there. Yeah.
What were you? See, the thing is I remember a Gravs back in the day who was more humble, who was more reserved, who was like, my players are developing, you know, I'm coaching a mediocre team. This is how I have to present myself. And Are you? Is cocky grabs here to stay, or is this like you're only as cocky as long as your team is? Clearly.
I think it's fun, especially because the whole team has this aura just around them. And
So they're corrupting you, is what you're
on
saying.
a serious note, though, I think there's a big difference between being arrogant and being cocky. And I'm
Yeah.
not sure if it translates to English that well, but basically arrogant, the way I see it says, if we play our best, we know we are the best.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's fair to say. Cocky would be saying, no matter what happens, we can't lose because they're too bad. So we just have the confidence to say, if we play our A game, we should not lose. And I think that's also how we carry ourselves. But we are really aware that if early game goes wrong or I enter draft or something, we might end up losing. So we're still preparing the same way like if we would against SKT or something. So we have fun, but we take it seriously, for sure.
That's interesting. Because like obviously I think that's like the number one thing that fans like to bring up whenever G2 wins or is like disrespectful in an interview. They're like, oh, their egos are so big, like they're gonna lose, they're gonna fail Europe because they're so overconfident, like they don't respect their opponents, how dare they, why don't they take this game seriously?
How much of it is a night? Because you guys are basically at the helm of the two largest brands right now in Europe, and I can only imagine some of the landmines that means that both of you had to step on occasionally. But like, players talk about it all the time that it's difficult to walk that line. Do you guys find that as well, being talking pieces for Fnatic and G2?
No, not really. But I think both orgs have always let their players and staff just speak on their own behalf and just be okay with sharing their opinions on anything, like whether it's leaving home early, like players wanting to go home early or anything else. I think they've always been very open about it. In my time in G2, I don't think Carlos ever said like, don't say this, don't say that. Yeah. They don't really mind.
So for G2 at least, there's of course way more pressure, right? But it now feels unfair. Like Carlos is very overbearing sometimes, but in the sense that he just wants us to win. So it's a positive pressure. And it's fun, right? Like you don't want to be mediocre. Like that, I think that's the worst thing you can be in sports. To just hang around and maybe I win, maybe I lose. So I like this role way more. And yeah, it's just fun, right? And we also, like, even if we would lose at some point, we would continue being this kind of arrogant style because it just fits us. And I think every great player or great team in reality has this ego. Like you can't tell me that a player like Faker honestly is that humble in interviews. Like, oh, we could lose, we could win here, we could lose against them, and they're all great players. Like in reality, he would be saying, like, of course I'm better, and that's fair to say. I think there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you still give them the respect on the game day.
Yeah, that's something that Pep Guardiola said. Every good team is arrogant, and it's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you, like, I think that doesn't show as often as people expect it to in esports, and Faker's like the prime example, right? Where he's like commenting some random wild card mid laner, like, he's a great opponent and I respect him. And you're like, okay, come on. Like, Faker's like, Jesus, like, you can, like, 1v5 their team, calm down. And I think that I would love to hear that more, but I like that both of your teams are willing to say it. Obviously, you have, like, both have members of your team. Not you anymore. I would say normally in the past, it's like Jankos used to be a personality who was a little more reserved, and now I think he's like, I mean, I know what he's like behind the scenes, but in front of a camera, he was a little more reserved, and obviously he's not anymore. And you have a nice mix on your team, Joey, in the sense that, like, I feel like Broxa is very respectful, and Whippo is, I'm not going to say disrespectful, but much more willing to, like, lay it out there, to put it out there, to say how he really feels, which is not always positive about the opposition. So it's a good balance of personalities. Froskerin, talking about the series, though.
Which
you ready?
one?
The Fnatic G2 one. The greatest series of all time. Ever. Who's going to win and why? And remember, your job here is to be as hyperbolic as possible so that our guests get enraged. And then they flame you.
Okay.
For the entertainment of our audience.
So I think Fnatic's only going to play 5 champions. And everyone knows exactly what they are.
Yeah.
And they can't play any other style because they failed to show that. No, I don't know. The thing is that was all sarcasm. Please don't blame me.
They're going to quote that. That's the thing that they quote.
Yeah, that was the one that gets clipped out. I mean, the reality is that it feels that no analyst can ever bet against G2. And I don't know how that feels for you, Joey, but it almost just feels like you look at G2, and even if you can't tell what they're good at, because it feels like it does change from like game to game, credibility-wise, like talk about a landmine stepping on it, it hurts. I do think that there are inherent weaknesses to G2 and definite evolutions. Like I think G2 has gotten better over the split, and I think the same thing can be said for Fnatic. You guys did change a lot over the course of the split. It wasn't just running the same 5 champions, but ultimately, if anyone asks, I think any analyst or any coach that isn't Fnatic, it's probably going to be G2. And if anyone asks Fnatic, it's probably going to be Fnatic because it has to be. Otherwise, you guys don't have a chance before the match starts. So.
No offense taken. I think it's fair to say that we are underdogs going into the series. That G2 has proven to be the best team in the West, if not the world, at MSI as well. So, yeah, us being underdogs, okay. I don't think we're as big of an underdogs as some teams would like to think, or like analysts or other staff members. Maybe Grabs as well. I think it's relatively close to 50-50. Beating G2 3 times in one day, that's going to be rough. I think 1 or 2 games is very, very doable. But yeah, can G2 actually, if we take 1 or 2 games, can they bounce back and still win? That is a good question.
I think your biggest win condition will be me. If I run it down and draft.
I might agree with it. I might agree with it.
I think
You're the weakest link.
okay then. Okay. No, we're getting there. No, I mean, Fnatic for sure will have something prepared in the early games. That's the thing we are most worried about because it's Fnatic and they always show us in playoffs. So it's going to be about getting into the game on an even footing. And then I think unless they... Because the thing is, okay, we have champs like Pyke. We can say it now openly because we both first picked it in our series, respectively.
Yeah.
If he's playable, he will play it in that series, and it's more about which team gets it and what team is more prepared to play against a champion, right? Because what Frost said is right. Both teams should kind of know what's coming, in a way. So it's about preparation in that regard. But I think if we get to the early game, even they will not handle the mid game really well. Because also we know how they want to play it out if they are not in the best position. Of course, I can't go in depth here what I think they're gonna do.
Why not?
Please
do tell.
You will show it in the first games, and then the game is gonna be over really quickly. So
exactly 8 minutes and 30 seconds. Blippo goes to ward. We kill him every game.
I would just think this, that like comparatively to Rogue and Schalke have like clean fundamentals, but they're quite systematic in how they think about the game. It's like quite linear. I do think that Fnatic is the only team that thinks as, it sounds so stupid to say, but like fluidly about the game. Like as an example,
they're adaptable. They can respond to in-game changes.
They problem solve during the game. Like depending on what matchups are, Fnatic will, just like G2, like put the top laner in the mid lane to find a matchup. If a summoner spell goes down, they'll change lane assignments to like be dependent of that, whereas like Rogue and Schalke just haven't shown that same type of flexibility. So if there's any team that could contest G2 right now, I would hope that it's Fnatic, just because I don't think any other team has the capability to be that smart on the fly to deal with what G2 throw out as quickly as they do.
It's also in all seriousness, of course, Fnatic is the only team I think in this league against us, at least, that doesn't just lose. Because against most teams, it feels like we have a 3k gold lead and then they suddenly stop playing the game. Sit on a tower and farm waves. Whereas Fnatic is, I think, really creative and really good at finding out, okay, we are behind, how to get back into the game actively. And that means if for 1 second you don't track a TP timer or where a top jungle mid AD carry is, suddenly you will have 5 people in your lane, killing you, getting your tower. So that's something we have to respect for sure. And that's also why the games against them are so fun, because we never actually won the game until the Nexus is destroyed. As dumb as it sounds, but that's how it is against Fnatic compared to other teams, right?
Best series ever.
I wouldn't go that far, but
maybe the finals in Athens then.
Yeah, there we go.
Possibly.
Yeah. No, I think both teams have very creative players, and then as you said, even when you're 3k gold up, there's a lot of things that can happen if you are not fully focused within the moment. I also think we're one of the teams that's not afraid to come out swinging. Like we'll contest the first 10 minutes, we'll fight you to the death, and we'll just take every fight and be fine with it and be confident about it.
Yeah.
Very often when it comes to prepping for series, I talk to teams that are lower down in the standings and they're much less worried necessarily about what their opponent's doing. Like, yeah, the coach is going to do some draft prep, right? But for the most part, the player's just like, we just need to improve in our current system, right? You talk to Splyce, they've got this idea of how they want to play the game. They want their players to get better at that. They want to keep their focus there. But it feels like you guys are so far ahead of the rest of the teams in Europe right now that you probably have the luxury of prepping specific things. So like how much of what you look at in a series is how do we beat Fnatic and not like how are we the best version of G2?
I'm thinking about how much in depth I can go here. I'd say we're one of the teams that perhaps less against their opponent than others, for sure, compared. But if you play against Fnatic, they have a very distinctive champ pool. Then, of course, you have to go and say, okay, what if they play this? How can we punish it? What do you want to contest early? So there's a clear idea how we approach them, but we're not specifically practicing against them. We're actually practicing stuff we think can also be good going into Worlds because we secured Worlds already. So the gaze already went a bit further. Having certain threats ready already and certain opening picks basically that give a distinctive style, which you might show, might not show. So we're not gonna just look at Fnatic for sure.
From a Fnatic perspective, is it similar, or is when you're looking at G2, who's kind of the perceived first place, when you feel like you're an underdog, is more of your prep focused on like actually attacking what G2 does?
A little bit of both. We're not specifically practicing certain champions just to beat G2. We're just looking at what is strong in the meta. How do we counter it? How do we play it ourselves? What champions do we draft around it? So in that sense, yeah, are we prepping for Worlds? I guess, but it's not really that like we're playing these strong champions because they're going to be good at Worlds. It's just, okay, these are the strongest champions in the meta. We have to be able to play it. We have to be able to play against it. And we know G2 is going to contest these champions. So at the same time, you're also attacking G2, I guess.
Okay. Makes sense. I mean, like maximizing kind of that efficiency of prep. Now, looking at who you actually practice against, I know we talked about this a little before we went live, but who do you actually practice against right now? Obviously, it's like Rogue and Schalke still scrimming. Most of the teams have gone home. You guys are playing one of the biggest series, right? You're going into into Athens for another big series of the years, but it feels like everyone is gone. Like, is this like some of like the most difficult time of the year to actually find good practice, despite it also being like the highest stakes?
I think this week is still really easy. Like our week is filled with Rogue and Schalke, and I imagine it's almost the same for Grabs. And we practice our academy teams on days where both teams are not available. So on a Saturday, Rogue and Schalke are playing each other. So then we have another scrim partner. And during this weekend, we also played against our academy team because other teams were playing or were having off days or playing World of Warcraft maybe. So yeah, this week is easy. I think the last week is the hardest because if there's 3 teams left, then you're going to scrim someone that you are probably going to face in Athens. So you don't really want to show everything, but also there's only 3 teams, and that doesn't really add up because you need an even number.
Yeah, for us, I mean, I would agree, but with a point now where scrimming against us is not what people want to do. In both ways, that we have days where we're like really good and we smash you, and teams don't like that before the game day, right? But more often than not, players on my team tend to have fun in scrims as well at a certain point. That means productivity goes down the drain as well. So the teams figured out, okay, maybe it's not the best practice to play against them because either they make the games such a fiesta, like with Tiety games, and we don't learning anything, or we're getting smashed. So right now we are having, of course, like 1 or 2 days with those teams that still play. But we're already like looking at the ERL teams, which actually are pretty good, I would say. Like, of course, I don't want to say who we scrimmed.
LDLC.
Can't confirm or deny. If you start that way, I also go that way, you know that, right? But since you mentioned them, they're, for example, pretty good. Fundamental-wise, better than some of the bottom tier teams in the LSC. So that's exciting. Fiddle 6 exciting.
There you go. Remember, there you go.
To see those regional teams stepping up. So I think it's worth our practice, and I think that's what's going to fill the week before FNC as well.
In Worlds, and I guess to a lesser extent at MSI, but I think Worlds is a bit more applicable. I can't speak. Applicable.
Applicable.
Applicable. Thank you. Thank God I don't talk for a living. You guys are there against Invictus Gaming for like a week, and I know that there were other teams that were around the area, but how much scrim practice do people actually get at those types of tournaments? Because I think for the fans, it's really hard to comprehend that when you get to top 4, pretty obvious what's happening behind scenes, but top 2 at a tournament like Worlds where you have a massive break before a final, like what are your options?
I think at Worlds we were really lucky because what ended up happening is that we scrimmed Damwon and Griffin, which were not in Worlds, but we're already preparing for the next season. So in that sense, we're really lucky. And I think the week before that, we played G2 quite a bit. I would say 50% of our practice was against G2 going into the semifinals because we trusted each other not to leak to the Chinese teams. And then the other half was filled with Damwon.
Pretty much, yeah. And also for MSI now, I can speak about it, is that it was kind of rough because the group stage games are so drawn out, the days, because you play the first game and the fourth game, you're sitting there for 4 hours doing nothing. Then going back and practicing is most often than not really helpful because players are not going to be in the mental state to actually practice efficiently. And then the off days, I think, for example, a team like, actually, I don't want to say it. One team in the tournament is very secretive and did not want to scrim us at all and fear of showing picks. So that makes it kind of awkward to find good scrim partners. So sometimes it's just, guys, have a free day. That being said, I think this year, G2 are very aware of burnout because we have the core of the old G2 who went to semifinals Worlds. We have Caps who went to the finals. and we know how long the season can get, and especially these Worlds moments. So we took basically every day we could take off, or every week we could take off, we took it. So I think we're like in a really, really good mental state for being at playoffs summer. That's going to help us for sure in the long run.
In terms of Worlds being in Europe and the European teams, are you guys going to help each other? It's not necessarily like trading secrets, but I don't think it's any surprise that the LPL teams all talk.
And the LCK teams.
And the
Kessel,
LCK
literally
teams.
gives them, I think, a bucket of stats.
And it's like no flame. I think fans sometimes think of that as cheating. And in reality, I'm like, no, of course that's going to happen. Like every team wants to win. And at the end of the day, if it's LPL versus LPL or LCK versus LCK, that's when like the knives come out and people will backstab to throw each other down. And you get great League of Legends. But is Europe ever going to combine their efforts, help each other as a region?
I think we'll be main practice partners. Also, Korea and China is probably not going to bootcamp in Europe. So that means we have limited amount of scrim partners. So we'll be scrimming G2 quite a bit, I imagine, and Team Liquid. I always say the higher the stakes, the more risk of cheating. And at Worlds, the stakes are at the highest. So cheating doesn't really happen, but yeah, leaks happen a lot. So you always have to be worried about what you do and don't scrim. Sometimes leaks come from a very unexpected angle. I've also been beneficiary of that. Like randomly you get a leak from a team you would never expect to get a leak from, and through a player, and it doesn't make sense. But we also know we've been leaked upon multiple times, and it also happened last Worlds, I'm sure.
Yeah, and people have the wrong perception of what leaking means in that context. It's not like one comes, by the way, they played as champion. It's if you, for example, if on Tuesday, like
You're having breakfast.
in the imaginary world, we play Fnatic, and for some reason now they have higher ban priority than a champion didn't have before. You can infer the other team they scrimmed before might play the champ. And since you're not in a big league like in the LSC where they scrim a team you don't play against, like in quarterfinals, you can infer this might be a team we play against, and you can think, okay, this is something they might pull out. And that's, I think, not even leaking. That's just how you prepare for the week. And if you see a strong pick comes up, let's say we scrim IG, or like we scrimmed IG and MSI, they picked a certain champ, you think, oh, the champ is good, we're going to play it too. So if you like think about it for a second, you're going to infer, okay, the other teams should pick it up too.
So one of the things that's happened in the past when not everyone has been located in the same area for a boot camp is that specific regions have, I'm going to call inbreeding a meta. Remember this conversation? So
The 2015 LPL.
2015 LPL only basically scrimmed each other because they were convinced that they were insane and just like it up completely. I'm swearing a lot this episode. Sorry, Phil, you're going to have to dip that. Butchered it. Like came in, clearly had no idea what was good and what was bad. Clearly had just like misread entirely. Are you guys worried at all? I know like right now, from my perspective at least, like EU, strongest region in the world. Does that mean that we know everything? No, definitely not. So is there a concern with LPL, LCK kind of staying on one side of the world for this boot camp leading up? And then also, I guess, Team Liquid will be here and you guys staying here. Is there a concern that like you're not going to have the right information or that you might end up in that same situation where there's like a blind spot in terms of what is and what isn't playable heading into Worlds?
I think so. So there is some worry. On the other hand, I think that Korea has usually been pretty slow in picking up new things and actually innovating at Worlds. So they usually have like a weaker first week. Whereas EU has always been very innovative and open to new things. So I think we should have an edge. Having said that, I also remember we had a little bit of this, our own little meta. I think it was 2017 Worlds. And then we ended up being the only team in the entire tournament to play a game without Arden support and lost that game. So that really sucked. But I think being from EU and also having G2, who is a team that innovates a lot, makes it easier to just accept it and be like, okay, we don't have to know the Chinese meta. We don't have to know the Korean meta. If we know what G2's meta is and we have our own meta, we can probably make something out of it.
Yeah, and I mean, for me personally, I can say I have it pretty easy because my players can first-time champs on stage and they play them well. So if China thinks they have a new meta, then Wonder's going to put out the Soraka top lane with Smite and they will have no idea what's hitting them. But on a serious note, again, like we are very creative and I mean, you know Caps, right? We don't have like 5 picks to put in scrims, like, oh, they're really good. Oh, no, save them for Worlds, so they get nerfed. So we already have like a list of champs we want to play at Worlds, which we can't show now because Caps is a bit of an interesting character when it comes to playing those champions.
Yeah.
So
I'll let you
we
in on
will be prepared, let's say.
I'll let you in on a little secret. When he says they're OP and he doesn't want to play them until Worlds, he's not going to play them at Worlds.
yeah. We had the MSI. We're saving for MSI. You going to play this? I don't feel it. Like.
Yeah, he told us the entire year he was saving Aurelion Sol for the World semi-finals.
Yeah.
And then we're like, Caps, it's time, you know. Like, nah, I'm not playing Aurelion Sol.
Is it weird both having like coached such a big player and such a big name now in European League of Legends? Like, what was your experience? Because you obviously like you were the start, Joey. Like Caps comes in from from TCL at the time, comes into your hands, and like what was your experience coaching Caps? And then maybe Grabs can share too, and you can see like if he's changed, if he's evolved, if he's the same like smiley, dopey kid who just happens to be a savant at League of Legends.
I would say for 99% it was always a pleasure and just really fun to have him around, which is a higher percentage than I would say most players. So yeah, it was just always fantastic to work with him. He's actually that smiley dopey kid off of the camera too. It's not just a camera kind of thing.
Yeah.
So he always lightens the mood and made everyone feel better about himself. He was running around laughing, cracking jokes. I don't know, just a pleasure. I think the 1% is that some days he would come in the office and you would know, oh, it's one of those days because he just had this kind of mood or aura around him. You're like, okay, we're going 0-5 today in scrims, or we're losing a stage today. He has those days, but it only happened 2 times or 3 times throughout the entire year, so it wasn't that bad, right? So that's the other 99% where it was just amazing working with this guy. Yeah.
But then he has an up day and you're like, all right, well, it's doomed.
So as a person, like he's a really good kid, right? You like him around. In scrim-wise, he's the enabler of the team in a bad way. Basically, every third game it feels like we have a meeting around, okay guys, play it a bit serious, like try to improve. Yeah, sure, we will do it. And then actually the early game goes fine, and then like Caps is fed, and we're like, play around Caps, wait for us. And you just see him like into support tempo, going on the tower 1v3, dying, and the rest of the team, okay, guess it's time to end. And just all 5 players go in and fight 24/7. And this happens every single game. And it's not always him, but he is the starting point for most of those games. We're going to play serious now, and you just see him flying through the map, like, ain't happening. And then it's going to be like a happy game again.
I feel like you were blessed, Joey, because at least on Fnatic, you had like some voices of reason, right? From talking to your players a lot last year. You had Soaz, who's like voice of reason. You've got Broxa, voice of reason. And I know Hylissang goes like, Rek was also like pretty chill, but then you've got like Hylissang, you've got Bwipo, you've got Caps who all just like want to go in at any given moment. And I feel like G2 doesn't have that. I feel like there's no voice of reason like, hey guys, let's not on the side of G2.
But that's what I mean. We have players that try, and maybe they can accept one int, but the second int, they're like, I'm not gonna have fun too. The games where we end in LSC, like in one push, basically confident in scrims because we say like, okay, let's play for T2. And then one player kills somebody solo, goes for the tower there. I'm like, I guess we end now. And then if you start inting, let's not base anymore. We just fight now. And that's the call. Like, people are annoyed saying that, like, we're just fighting now. But they do that. And nobody's like willing to say, no, let's base. Like, okay, let's fight. And then we're going to stand there at the tower, losing the game maybe in scrims, but not. But on stage, it works.
So is there a such thing as like a bad week of scrims for G2? Because we hear about teams coming on stage all the time, like, oh, we had a bad week of scrims, and it translates into a bad stage performance. Like for you this year, let's say, has there been like a bad week where?
Thinking back, like the Chinese nickname of artist actually really fit the team in a way that our week of scrims does not depend on the results, but the atmosphere we leave the scrims with, right? That's then where or the coaching staff, we have to like be really careful of making sure that we don't leave the day angry. So like have a meeting again, talk about, okay, what happened? Because sure, it's all looks buddy and happy in G2. But of course, these players are world class and they get annoyed if somebody is not playing to their standards. Or, for example, there's this inting, what's a joke right now, sometimes goes too far and then other players get annoyed as well. And it's always something different. So making sure that nothing is left behind in between players is really important. And if we basically, for example, if I enter the room and Xerxe is like, "Raps" again, then I know it's going to be a good day because it's happy, right? If Caps is smiley, then it's going to be a good day, and that's all that matters in the end.
Is there like a fine line for a team like G2 or even Fnatic where you guys have world-class players, some of the best in Europe in their individual positions, but is it being held together by this friendship, this professionalism, whatever it is, and is it very quickly easy to turn to the other side? Like in the same way that Splyce collapsed, is there a possible collapse for Fnatic and G2 if the mental just flips to the other side? Let's say, Perks is tired that Caps has entered one too many times and then just decides to burn it all, because we hear all the time about teams. I mean, I think Misfits is probably a perfect example, like the internal dynamics that just didn't pan out for them.
I would say there's always enough trust in the other players' individual capabilities that doesn't really happen, that there's a complete burnout or like someone is saying, I'm not giving anymore, because both teams have to qualify for Worlds, at least like for Fnatic. I think we've had our lows already, and I don't think we can get any lower than we did like in start of spring or maybe like shortly after Rift Rivals. It's just that the players are too good to actually not try on stage or try enough in scrims to actually make it work. And I imagine that must be the same for G2, where you have some bad days, you have some conflicts at times. That's okay, that happens, but not to the point where it's not manageable anymore.
Yeah, I mean, for us at least, the same culture we have around picks, where everything is open and everybody can something throw in, is the same around how like people are in between each other, right? So if something is annoying, we have the culture of just saying it. So we sit down and say, what you did there was really annoying to me. Could you please stop that? And it's like, yeah, sure, I can see why it's annoying. I won't do it again. So again, of course, there are bad days, but it never feels hostile or that there's actually a chance this team splitting apart or like hating each other suddenly, which happened in other teams for sure. Like there's this vibe you can feel where like, even if I talk now, it's not going to help and the players are like too far apart. I had it like in every team before. But in this one, I have a really hard time seeing it unless we, for some reason, like even losing finals, wouldn't matter. We would be laughing like, we already secured worlds, doesn't matter. Like we don't care. I mean, we do care, right? But it's just this air we have, where happy-go-lucky. And for example, I know when scrims end, they all go to the sofa together, play Mortal Kombat or different game, just laugh around. So they actually are not depending on League of Legends to be together. They just enjoy the company, which is really rare and really lucky. So yeah, I don't have that worry.
Is it harder to maintain that kind of atmosphere, Youngbuck, in a team house where players are like living in apartments? Is like, do you feel a hard day more than it sounds like Grab feels a hard day because your players go to separate places and aren't spending necessarily as much time together?
I think it has both benefits and downsides. I do think it's a big downside that you don't have the players spending as much time together outside of practice because, some players just want to go home. They want to have a personal life. They want to go to the gym, maybe to a girlfriend. So you have to also kind of be okay with it because as a coach, I'm pro social life, pro girlfriend. Like you don't have to live in a gaming house. I'm not really for that. It also does have the advantage that if a player is not feeling very well, he can go to his own space and actually just come back recharged the next day. So I think it has ups and downs. I would still go for the office versus all living in a gaming house, but I definitely see the benefits because also in G2 it was a thing where there was a really big camaraderie because everyone was living together.
Yeah, and I mean the one or two times that I visited the house during that era of G2, it always felt very strong. And even on a team where you had like big language barriers right at the time, when Expect was still learning English, when Trick was still learning English, like it definitely showed through in that house, which isn't always the case in gaming houses. So I'm glad that that's like something that G2 has been able to maintain. But yeah, personally, I could never do the gaming house life. I don't know how anyone does it, if I'm completely honest. But it's impressive, and I'm glad that it's working out. Your series is obviously exciting, but I think that the second we talk to your teams, we always look to Worlds because it's just easy to do, right? Because you guys are the expected favorites. But I'm curious, you look at the rest of the pool, Splyce and Origin, obviously very much in Gauntlet. I think there's chances actually for Splyce to get knocked out technically, but I think it's a fringe case. Who do you expect?
I actually think they locked Gauntlet.
Did they lock Gauntlet?
By Vitality getting knocked down.
Yeah.
I think...
Yeah.
I was interviewed for a documentary on that.
Oh,
so.
nice, perfect. Thank God you've got the information. Once again, I'm out of the loop. So I'm curious, who do you think is going to be the third team to join you guys when it comes to Worlds?
For the memes, it would be Rogue. But if we actually want to have the third best team, it still should be Splyce, I think. I think Origin is too far gone, honestly. They still have really good fundamentals, but I think they're just clueless around how they want to play the game out together. So I don't have much hope for them, but sure, we meme around Splyce not doing much in the early game, but they still know how pressure works in most part of the games, and even saying, okay, we play for this item is not inherently a bad style if the team goes together. So I think they will have enough time for Gonda to reset mentally, like we did last year again, and then be a strong contender for sure.
Yeah, I think Splyce or Schalke would be the best representatives for Europe as a third place. I think they've just been consistently the two teams that have a very defined style, but are actually good at what they're doing. And that is something that is usually very useful at Worlds. You don't want a team that does something differently every week, unless you're G2.
All right.
Okay. I don't know, but you do it properly, right? You do it properly. So a team like Schalke is very predictable, but they're also very refined in what they do. They play around bot lane very well, and that is a kind of style that can work really well at Worlds, depending on the meta. But so I can see them also being a good representative for Europe. I can see Splyce being a good representative as well.
So our Origin, you say, are too far gone. It's like if they make the Gauntlet run, is like the Origin peak I don't know, when was the Origin peak? What was the best Origin I've ever been? Is it Rift Rivals? Is it Finals last in spring?
So I was going to say probably their best of 5 against Fnatic.
Yeah, that was peak. Is that still like a worthy Worlds contender, or is it just like, is that just too far off based on their last week of performance for you to really like put faith behind the OG Miracle Gauntlet run?
I think they must be too far gone to go from second place in spring to not even making playoffs in summer. There must be something wrong. I don't know what is wrong, but it just feels like they've just lost whatever made them strong. And also Sonatara got nerfed, so thank goodness for that.
So what could happen is that they narrow down on one style only and pray that this one style will not get countered by any team. But I think they have to start. Actually, they're not the last team, right? Because they have the 70 points, 70 points.
They'll be first round no matter what, but they might be the higher seed or the lower seed. That's
okay, then they have to
confirmed.
run it back the entire gauntlet. Then I don't think they have a chance. Actually, I think if they had to like max play 2, because then they can actually narrow down one style at least, like we did last year in Worlds with the 1-3-1, where we could only play that one style. And if they ban Tam Kench, it's gonna be a bit rough. Thankfully, RNG didn't for most of the time. But yeah, then I could see it, but it will be rough for sure.
All right. I mean, it's just crushing, right? Because I think everyone had high expectations of OG. And yeah, just to see them fall is honestly truly surprising. One more question about your best of 5 to round this out. Is the winner of the Fnatic G2 best of 5 the best team in the world?
So in typical G2 fashion, I have to say yes, because it's going to be us. But at the same time, we still haven't won against a Chinese team since RNG. We're 0-5 against IG, which may not go to Worlds even.
So I was having this discussion with Inder and Vedius, because one of the biggest differences between like Europe and China right now is that China will run combat summoners basically every single time for their bot lanes as opposed to teleports. Like Europe, much more reliant on running TPs. And I actually am very curious to see what you guys do with it, because the way that I see it, you run into a Chinese team, you fight, they've got more combat summoners, they're just as keen to fight, you pick the wrong fights, and then they just try to snowball from there. Or Europe could do its thing where it just like plays the map, uses all its 20 million TPs, and then just like China has no brain. It's basically Europe without a brain.
My big worry is that if you play a team like FPX, the game just revolves around caveman style. And every skirmish will be taken no matter what. The water's tempo, it doesn't matter, and we just fight. And then of course it's a flippy game, right? From watching LCK without going too deep, I think as long as we don't handshake their baffling Drake and Hell fights every game, where the 10 guys are there fighting for their lives, we should be fine. Again, as I said, for LPL, there's always their willingness to fight as well, even off tempo, which might be hard to deal with. But I think we have a really big shot at being favorites going into Worlds. The good thing is we already see ourselves that way. That means there will not be extra pressure or something. We think we are the best if we play our games, so it's just on us to show it.
Youngbuck, looking at the international competition aspect of this, because I guess the kind of are you the best team in the world was more of a meme question, but that's actually a good point. International competition, how are you the same way where you're looking at like caveman style from China? Are you respecting more LCK? Like, who are you actually worried about?
I would be a little bit more worried about China, but that's just because they don't really play that very solid macro, which is really easy to play against. I mean, it's really tough when they're better at it, when they're better at the macro. But I think that both Fnatic and G2 can actually match the Korean style macro. So then if you do end up in a caveman style or a very sloppy early game, so like it gets a little bit flippy, I guess. I don't think as flippy as people like to think. I think there's a lot of thought behind early game, like pathing, jungling, where you put the pressure, how you play around jungle, how you play around the lanes. But yeah, China would be more difficult. Having said that, I think for marketing reasons alone, we have to say that the winner in Athens is also the best team in the world, at least until World starts.
Thank you.
That's good job. Good job. Yeah, thank you. Riot, send the check. That's all I'm asking for. So then I guess like Worlds is exciting. Looking forward to seeing how you guys stack up against China in the LCK, since we've pretty much decided the LCS. And I think LMS at this point too is no longer a talking point, given that they've been poached to nothingness.
Fofo is finally going to go to Worlds. Do you guys watch LMS? No, just me?
No. That's fine. You don't. Oh, poor I'm sorry, LMS. I really love you, but it's not happening anymore. Flash Wolves died and the region died with them.
I'm just really happy that PvB renamed. So that's one threat out of the window. So maybe the new Vietnamese team will be the same. So I really hope we dodge them in groups. That's my big hope, and then we'll be fine.
That's what
I
you're,
know.
you're memeing about getting third seed, but like, what if you have to go up against
Vietnam.
Vietnam, you're doomed, dude.
No, it sounded funny, the caveman style thing, but I'm saying it because we're the same. So if they start fighting, we will fight them. So that happened in group stage MSI, right? So yeah, I mean, my players were joking around going for plans instead because it's more fun, more games. But yeah, if then suddenly there's the Vietnamese team, then I would be really sweating. Like this would not be fun. for
Really
sure.
doomed.
Yeah. I would call it like Carlos. We might have an issue here. I'm
right.
warning you.
So, looking at the last thing I want to talk about today is that all-pro voting and MVP voting finished up. I assume you guys voted it or your team got a vote. I don't actually remember as much as to how it actually works. But I wanted to talk a little bit about MVP. Obviously, you guys aren't allowed to vote for people within the context of your team, so you usually have to vote for someone else. So if you guys are comfortable, I'd be curious to see like who you thought was worthy of MVP and kind of how you guys thought about MVP as a vote, because I know that there's a lot of different takes on whether or not it should be the objectively best player of the league. Should it be the person that, like, without this guy on your team, the entire thing crumbles? So do you guys want to share?
Our MVP is Jankos. I just think he's been consistently top 2 jungler throughout the split. Every week of the split, he has been performing very well. So he had really stellar performances, always playing Sejuani. So playing the meta picks, he was taking one for the team. I just don't remember a bad performance from Jankos this split. So, and also I've said this before, I think that Jankos was MVP at MSI and didn't get enough recognition there. So that combined, I think he deserved to be the MVP.
Yeah, for me it was a toss-up between Hillsong and Humanoid. I picked Humanoid, I believe, just because I think he's like Splyce needs an X factor like him. Because I think he's actually really good and he can carry a game alone, but then Rogue happened and now it looks kind of awkward.
It's okay. We're all feeling a little bit awkward after those first quarterfinals about the All-Pro.
And for Hilly, it just showed as always this meme of Hilly int, right? And I mean, same with Krabs. But just having a player who's willing to... Okay, how do I say it? There are players, supports especially, who know they're going to die, but they bait a good fight. Someone like Miffy, I think, was the first one who did it a lot, who like baited the enemy team to fight them by being out of position. Hilly does this really well. He roams really well. I think he recognizes the lane set really well. That means he knows when he says, okay, this lane is doomed now, I have to roam, or Reckless can catch alone, I can move now, and he gives so much pressure to the team on both sides. Like if you play against Hilly and he's a roaming champion, you're really sweating. So I think those those players are really important for their respective teams. That shows Humanoid in the end. Now he lost against Rogue, but there was some voting for regular season anyway. So
yeah, of course it is. Yeah, it's all regular season awards, which is like I think it's really funny because people instantly forget that and just like hard flame. They're like, how could you ever have thought Splyce was a good team? They lost to Rogue, right? Like ignoring the fact that they finished in third. Frosco. Did you also vote Jankos?
I did. I did Jankos, Perks, and Hilly were my 3. Originally, I had Mickey on over Hilly, but in looking at Fnatic games, I felt it was disingenuous not to have any Fnatic players on MVP, so I felt that Hilly was the most deserving, and I don't know, it's so hard to separate Perks and Mickey, and I decided that Perks was going to go on before Mickey, because that was basically like G2's bot lane, and then right behind Hilly, I had Humanoid, and then Vander.
Vander, that's a good shot.
I voted for Hylissang. It's really hard for me to vote for a G2 member. Because my belief is that without this one player, like the team would fall apart, and because obviously all of your team contributes a ton. I think Perks was my second. I wanted to vote for your bot lane, but I can't vote for them together, so I voted for Perks since he's the role swapper. But yeah, I think Hylissang is actually just an insane player, and I think that there's so many of Fnatic's games where I look at what Hylissang does and I go like, gee, like this game would not function without Hylissang here. And there's unwinnable games that he has turned around, and there are games where like. Clearly, you guys are like, okay, you're like kind of. I've 1 or 2 times where I felt like you guys kind of got trapped into a slower early game, and Hylissang breaks that, and Hylissang is kind of that defining feature. And also, I have a huge bias for playmakers, and Hylissang is obviously one of the most insane playmakers in the league. I think he's toe to toe with Mickey X, and depending on the day, they're like always fighting daily for who is the best support. And of course, he does have the downside, right? I think it's fair to say that he's had his moments, and. People will point at the Tom Kench game, which isn't entirely his fault, but obviously wasn't the best showing.
So is it weird to say that I think that Mickey is a better player, but Hilly's a better support?
Yeah, kind of. Like what? Like
I know. I think I know what you're getting at.
Yeah, it's just like Mickey. I think in every like metric is just like an incredible player mechanically. I don't think there's anything that he can't do, but Hilly is like such a very specific mind for his role and as a support and what that means for Fnatic. I think is, I don't know how else to say it. Like Hilly will do things that other people don't see. Whereas like Mickey can press buttons in ways that people didn't even think was possible.
Yeah. If you guys are comfortable, do you mind sharing, like, if you were to vote for a player on your team to MVP, who would it be? I know some, maybe if you're not, that's totally cool, because obviously you never know what team dynamics are like.
Yeah. I think that Hilly and Bwipo have single-handedly won the most games in our team, but I don't think we've had any underperforming players to split. So, I mean, like you've mentioned before, Hilly has single-handedly won us games that we should not have won. And I think Bwipo had a few of those games as well where he was winning lanes so hard that he shouldn't have been winning them, or I mean, like the G2 game, I think a lot of that was also contributed to Bwipo winning his lane and also getting away with like 6 HP once, but okay. Like he had a really big impact in a lot of the games. And then Bwipo only had like 2 or 3 really bad games, like the Rengar game against Rogue was just awful. So I think he's been really consistent. So they've been playmaking for us and actually winning the games really hard, or winning games that we shouldn't have won, whereas the other players have helped us win games that we should have won.
Yeah. No, I do agree, and for me, it pains me to say this because it's gonna hang over my head like a rainy cloud. It has to be Jankos, and yeah, this guy is the amount of information and sudden information he gets from his laners. Because very often, what happens is that we talked about this in a different podcast, right? That people think of junglers that they control the early game, and they say, "I path this way. That's how you trade." And I think that's how Korea, for example, still plays. They will never take a trade if the jungler's on the opposite side. Janko says, "Okay, I expect pressure to be there, and this is how I path." And then suddenly you hear Wonder say, or Perks, "I get a good trade, we can dive now." 2 minutes into the game. And Django's is like a supercomputer. Okay, I take this camp, walk there. While he walks there, Caps is going all in, so he has to like turn around and go there instead. And he still keeps up in farm and controls where the enemy jungler is. He's also the main voice of reason, as bad as it sounds, because you guys, how he knows is a troll. And I think that's also why in scrims they go so bad in that regard, because on stage he's like very focused and on coffee, on sugar, on his A game, controls everything, and in scrims he's like, yeah, I can't be bothered, and then just like the whole house is burning down around him, and he participates in it. So like if there's like a dompteur, is it dompteur in English as well? Like the guy in the circus who controls the animals?
Ringleader.
Ringleader? Okay, like he's the ringleader to the circus of G2, basically.
There you go. He's the guy with the whip and the chair fighting off the lions. Yeah. I like it. It's powerful, powerful imagery for the games to come. Is there anyone in your all-pro voting, or just in general in the league, that you think stood out to you that you think might be an uncommon choice? Because I think that like there's a lot of first and second. I feel like it's very often just going to be dominated by like G2 Fnatic, right? For the most part. Might be some Splyce players in there. Third team might be 50% Splyce, but then there's always somebody who makes it in. I think there's a lot of like scattered votes for individuals, and those are the most interesting to me. So is there anyone that you think that you guys voted for that like really stood out to you personally?
The top lane votes were the most difficult for us. There weren't many players that really stood out, and I think we have one of the players that is contesting for top 3. So, okay, Vizichachi is Splyce. I actually put Expect on second or third because I felt like he had a really good split. Had a lot of solo kills. I know it's a former player of mine, so I might be a little bit biased.
No, I put him third. That's why I'm smiling. Yeah. I'm like, thank God I'm not the only one. I'm not going to get flamed.
Yeah. So I think Excel finished 9th or 8th.
Last, I think.
Last even. Last, yeah. So yeah, Expect suddenly showing up in third place is a big deal. I don't know about any other role specifically. Maybe Selfmade still makes a case. I don't think he had as good of a split as he did in the spring, but he's still a really good player. Inspired. I mean, now he might finish third this split, but I think Inspired is going to receive quite a bit of votes as well for the top 3.
For me, the player of the biggest surprising factor for me personally also is Vander, because I was in the camp that kind of thought he's a little bit washed.
I was
old man mechanics, and I mean, I'm honest here, right? But he played really, really, really well the split. Mechanically both, and where he has to be on the map. He picked Pyke against us, and he actually was pressuring a lot more than we thought he would be. So I think also a huge part of Rogue's success right now is him. So all the props to him. I think I voted him third after Hilly and
Mickey.
I can't vote for Mickey.
You can't vote for Mickey. Oh yeah, who would you vote?
Second.
Maybe Norskeren? That's the guy we voted on in top 3.
No.
I think we put him on third.
So aggressive no there, Grab.
I'm sorry, Norskeren, but I think
Ignar maybe. We put Ignar in top 3.
I also Maybe I'm biased against Ignar, but I got really annoyed at Worlds where he played, where he only could play these engaged supports. It worked out, but he got heralded as like this super insane support where I think he made Maxwell play Ivan basically to cover for his Alan Sensor missing. And then suddenly he's the best support in the world, which I didn't agree with, so maybe I'm biased against him. But who's second actually? Could be Vander. Like Hillesang for sure first. Vander's in the top 3. Who's missing?
I mean, who else is like really up there for Osco?
I mean, mine was Mickey, Hilly, Ignar, Vander.
Could be Ignar 3 actually and Vander on 2.
I think mine was Mickey Hilly Ignar. I probably maybe should have voted for Vander. Vander has had a 6-6 split. If it wasn't all pro, if it was like MVP contestants, I think Vander would be.
I think
above it.
Shiva could actually have a good case for him, but he didn't have a lot of games.
Yeah.
Has to be
Mickey had a
actually.
bad year. Dreams is okay, but I think he's like middle of the pack. Jack Troll had a bad year.
Yeah, it's actually tough. I think top and support are actually the two hardest to
Yeah.
vote
Yeah.
for.
I think
Yeah.
Hiva personally, like on his highs. But you only have like
You're thinking
4
of like
games.
one Rakan game. Though.
No,
Like, that's
his
the only-
Volibear game.
His Volibear. Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
And he played a really sick Nautilus.
But top is especially brutal for me because it's like Wonder Bwippo. I think Bwippo.
It's Wonder, Bwippo, Alfari, Expect.
Dude, I
I
hate
thought Farian first actually.
you.
And then you get like Chachi in there and like Odo.
All right.
Or
This is-
you could flip that either way you want.
I'm curious, like your guys' opinions. Does Alfari deserve to be top 3? I would love to hear your perspective because this is actually a fight that I've been having in the office for the past week and a half.
Origin are still alive,
I want to
so
hear what you have
yes.
to say, and then like I'll like share kind of my opinion on the subject.
I think Alfari is in our top 3 because he's a better player than most top laners. So he's a top 3 top laner. I think the way that Origin plays does not showcase his skill at all. So I think from that point of view, you could say, well, he didn't have a great split because he didn't get to show it. But I think he's a top 3 player. So that's why I think we put him in 2nd or 3rd.
Yeah, and I mean top lane right now is in a weird spot where it doesn't really matter that much unless you like go really pop off performance. That's also where Wonder goes. I can pick Kha'Zix here, Soraka. It doesn't really matter actually. Just if you want to play Garen, give it to me. Like I'm a top laner, who cares? But yeah, I think Alfari is just very, very solid in all stages of the game, and it kind of felt like he's like the captain on a sinking ship in a way that he tried to win the games. Sometimes also like got cut off because of it, but his team seemed so lost, and he as a top laner had not the chance of actually having much impact. So I think he's still a really good player, and that's why I voted him first. So people don't forget just because he's playing on Origin that he's a really solid player.
Yeah. I mean, I think that he's a really solid player, and for me, he's like 4 or 5. I couldn't put him top 3 because the amount of I think one of the big things is that when people reference Alfari, they talk a lot about like always like winning in CS. He's always doing this and that, and I like look at his games and I'm like, well, he did get to counterpick a ranged top laner into a Mordekaiser 3 times. Like he's always playing these AD Kennen matchups. He's always playing these ranged top lane matchups. So like his stats always look fine to me, but then ultimately like his team is never 1-3-1ing and they're never winning the game, right? And so. Yes, you can choose not to fault Alfari for that, but it's also like if you're put in this position to do it and it's not happening, it's hard for me to like give you that benefit of the doubt.
We totally forgot about Cabochard.
After that series, you want to put Cabo. Like I don't think Cabochard had the best season. I think Cabochard is top 5.
I'm just saying, for all the things that you can fault Alfari, Cabochard is in the exact same boat
Actually,
there.
Yeah, like captains of sinking ships. My God.
Okay, Origin is sinking, but Vitality got bombed, burnt down to the ground, and just obliterated. Like what happened that series, what I saw from some players, like Frost said, it felt like really they just want to go, already booked the flights for the same evening, so that's how they played. In the same way also...
That's a meme in there.
That's not a meme, that's just how they played, like watching that.
So in the LPL, LNG beat a team, Invictus Gaming, and their AD carry didn't think that they were going to be able to beat them, so he booked his flights and then had to cancel.
Yeah, whereas the Vitality players booked their flights because they didn't want to win.
Yeah, of course.
Jesus, that's brutal, dude. I feel it's so rough for Alfari and for Cabo. And like Cabo is the more visible end. I think it's a similar case, but Alfari, right, is like in the farm zone, right? He's like living on his top lane island. Cabo is the other side of that, where he's like the guy getting a little bit more attention is the 4-0-1 Jace, and then like he's just watching his team die.
I can just share this because it was so funny to me that when he was playing the Jace game, and there's this 1 HP opponent, and you just see Skarner slapping it. Wanda got like really mad at the moment. He's like, if he gets that kill, he could solo carry this game, this 6 game again, sorry. And then like Wanda was like 3 minutes after, if he hit that kill, he was 1-9 the game right now, but Skarner got 2 kills, so it's unlucky. Like Wanda really, really fought for him that series. So Cabo definitely
he's just
in a rough spot.
for both of them, it's like they're Mad Max in the Mad Max movie, right? They're like they're the one sane person in this like dystopian hellish future. Everyone else around them is like huffing paint, running in. They're like strapped to the front of the car, like, oh shit, I guess this is happening. Yeah, I feel for them. Like I really want both those teams to recover because like. As much as Vitality get flack for talking smack, I like it. I would rather have a team that talks smack that doesn't. And OG's obviously like, it's a team full of historic names who have never quite crossed the threshold. And now Alphari's been lumped in with that group. So for Alphari's sake, I hope that they get their moment to shine because it's just, it's brutal. It's actually brutal.
Origin are boring.
Anything else you want to supplement that? You're just gonna leave that there? All right, I think that's probably pretty good. Final words, final thoughts. Can we get official predictions? Rogue, Schalke. I won't make you guys predict on your game because that's boring because you'll both predict your team and you'll predict some number of games. Yeah.
Which one of you is bold to say a 3-0?
I am. I mean, against G2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same, but for what team are you betting? That's the question. That's interesting.
That's a good one. My philosophy is that we start the series at 2-0 with good prep, and then they have to finish the third game.
Does the good prep mean me being on the team?
Yes.
Just like, perfect.
It means that we put a guy into the crowd with the sign that says Pig Garen or something along those lines for 2 games, and then we're like, okay, now you guys have to do it without the training wheels.
The good thing though is on the stage, it's dark, for like you can't see the fans because of the lighting. So this has to be like a big ass sign then. Like,
LED sign.
Maybe I'll be the one having the sign, and I'll just wave over at you.
That's so good.
This is how confident you two both are that you just literally just get to meme the crap out of this draft. Like this is a world where I don't think this would be allowed for the sake like competitive integrity, but like if this was like a week 8 game, we would definitely let Joey take an LED sign on stage and like hang it up and be like, pick this garbage champ.
Yeah, I mean,
and you do it because you would totally do it. God.
Okay, I go first. I think it's gonna like if you play each other. The most likely scenario is a 3-1, just because, as I said, one game, there's a huge chance they're going to stack, we run into them, they get 2 kills level 1, and then Boxer goes off. The other chance is that I got confused in 4-5, Caps picks, or he picks Vayne into Akali, and then suddenly we lose the game from there. But yeah, on even draft and even level 1 and even early game, I think 99% of the chances we should win. But I think 3-1 is the most likely scenario.
All right.
Yeah. I like the specifics that you lose games by us tacking on level 1 and you guys running into us.
No, me running it down in draft.
Oh yeah, you're running it down draft. Well, yeah. Well, that's a pretty big chance that happens, right?
I did give Jace twice into Aatrox. I'm just saying, like.
Yeah, I think we can bank on that. It's a solid win condition. Yeah. I think the games will be more even, but I think since both teams will come out swinging, it will be like 60-40, 40-60, depending on the draft. I think we have very similar play styles, so it's more like we prepared better at shutting down the other guy's play style.
Yeah,
like Mickey X is going mid with Pyke. Hylissang is going mid with Pyke. Yeah,
who goes
wins?
top then? Okay.
Then I guess, all right, that's good. Rogue Schalke really quick. Schalke favored, 3-0, 3-1. Rogue predictions out there.
I'll say 3-2 Rogue.
3-2 Rogue.
I don't care, but when I say the loser should go to NA Gauntlet and qualify for there. Because that's an easy road. A Fiddlesticks easy road. Just pick it out there. Like, it's really unfair that one of those 2 teams won't be the Worlds, but a team from there will be. So, especially after watching that final.
I'm just saying, do we have rules as to how a team can lose a slot at Worlds? That's my question for you out there. Someone find it. The rule books are pretty public.
I want the dystopian world where we actually just have, 5 major regions? So it's 5 qualification attempts at Worlds. So Europe has a tournament, NA has a tournament, Korea, China, and any team can go and participate into trying to get through the qualification.
You want just 100% an open circuit. Yeah. That's what you want. All right, bring it back. Season 2. Let's talk about the real days of championship points and earning it. Honestly, I had one more thing to say. I totally forgot what it was. You guys can check out this weekend's games. I believe Friday is Schalke versus Rogue. Saturday, G2 Fnatic. Match of the century. We already literally made a meme trailer called Match of the Eons, and now you guys are playing each other in a best of 5. I wish it was scripted, but it's not, folks. This happened naturally. Come watch. Thank you both for joining. This has been episode 11 of the EUphoria podcast.